In the harsh light of Boston General's emergency room, Jake Martinez buried his face in his hands, still stained with his daughter's blood. His construction uniform bore the evidence of the crash that had sent 8-year-old Sophia into surgery. The divorce papers clearly state joint medical decisions, the nurse explained firmly. Without your ex-wife's consent, we cannot proceed with surgery. Jake's voice cracked as he tried calling Carmen again, straight to voicemail like the previous 15 attempts. Then a delicate hand with a diamond ring gently touched his shoulder. "I know that feeling," said the blonde woman in the expensive black coat. Sitting alone in a hospital with no one coming to help. A man with calloused hands and a fractured heart. A woman with unlimited wealth but an empty penthouse. Follow the story of how genuine love can transcend every social barrier and build a family from the broken pieces of each other's lives. Jake Martinez was a 34-year-old construction worker in Boston, Massachusetts, who had been raising his daughter Sophia alone since she was 6. Each morning he woke at 5 o'clock, prepared a simple but nutritious breakfast, and roused Sophia by singing the Spanish lullabies his mother had once sung to him. Their small apartment in a modest complex in Dorchester was where neighbors knew the story of the young father who had overcome adversity to care for his little girl. Jake worked for Rodriguez Construction, where he was known as the first to arrive and the last to leave. His calloused hands told the story of overtime hours worked to afford the piano lessons Sophia loved. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, he would leave the construction site early, wash the dust and grime off in a public restroom, and take Sophia to her class at the Boston Community Music Center. He would sit on an old wooden bench, back straight with pride as he listened to his daughter play simple melodies. 2 years earlier, Carmen, Jake's ex-wife, and Sophia's mother had left them after an argument about her addiction issues. Jake had come home to find the apartment empty, a short note, and Sophia crying on her bed. "Am I not good enough for Mom to stay, Daddy?" The question had shattered Jake's heart. Since then, he had dedicated every spare moment to proving to his daughter that she was the center of his world. Each night, Jake read stories to Sophia in English, mixed with Spanish, even when his eyes drooped with exhaustion. He learned to cook her favorite meals from online videos, mended clothes when they tore, and attended every school event, even if it meant sacrificing overtime pay. His construction site friends often teased him about Mrs. Rodriguez from the first floor, a 55-year-old widow who always found reasons to call Jake down for minor repairs. Jake politely declined all invitations for outings or dates. "Sophia needs me," he would say, but deep down Jake was afraid of being hurt again. On that fateful Friday evening, Jake picked Sophia up from her piano lesson. They stopped at the corner store to buy ingredients for weekend pizza, a small ritual they both cherished. As their car crossed the intersection at Dorchester Avenue, an SUV driven by a drunk driver plowed into them at high speed. Jake's world tilted when he regained consciousness amidst blaring ambulance sirens and saw Sophia, unconscious, blood from a head wound soaking her school uniform. Hours later, as doctors explained Sophia's need for immediate surgery, Jake learned that without Carmen's signature, they couldn't proceed. His daughter was bleeding internally, and the woman who had walked away from them both was unreachable in some rehab center in Denver. Victoria Sterling, 38, was the widow of David Sterling, founder of Sterling Technologies, one of New England's largest software companies. 6 months earlier, David had died in a climbing accident in Colorado, leaving Victoria with a fortune exceeding $2 billion and an empty penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. Each morning, Victoria woke in her 90-square-meter bedroom designed by a renowned architect. She drank expensive Ethiopian coffee prepared by her housekeeper while gazing at the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. A successful businesswoman with an MBA from Northwestern, Victoria ran the Sterling Foundation, a charity focused on improving pediatric health care. Behind her perfect exterior and luxurious life, Victoria felt numbingly alone. She and David had tried for years to have children without success. They had been in the process of adopting when the accident occurred. Now, Victoria lived in a world where board meetings and charity galas couldn't fill the void in her heart. That Friday evening, Victoria was at Boston General Hospital for the inauguration of a new pediatric wing funded by the Sterling Foundation. Instead of going home after the ceremony, She wandered the hospital corridors, feeling a strange connection to the place. 6 months before, she had sat in a similar waiting room in Denver, signing David's organ donation papers in absolute solitude. As Victoria passed the emergency room, she overheard an argument. A man in a blood-stained construction uniform was pleading with the nurse to allow surgery for his daughter. "Carmen's in some rehab center in Denver. I can't reach her, and Sophia is dying." Victoria paused, the word Denver and the desperation in the man's voice catching her attention. She watched Jake collapse onto a plastic chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. No one paid attention to him, just an ordinary working man in a busy hospital. Victoria felt an invisible connection to this man. The same pain, the same helplessness when facing the complex medical system. Instead of walking away like other passers-by, Victoria sat down in the chair next to Jake. "I overheard your conversation with the nurse," she said softly. "Your daughter needs surgery?" Jake looked up, eyes red and suspicious. Victoria didn't look like anyone he'd ever encountered in his neighborhood. From her cashmere coat to her Italian leather shoes. "Sorry, I don't have time for," Jake began, but Victoria interrupted. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice low and certain. "6 months ago, I sat in a chair just like this one, feeling completely helpless as my husband died. No one sat beside me, no one offered to help. I couldn't save David, but perhaps I can help your daughter." Jake stared at this stranger, not understanding why she would care. But as Victoria took out her phone and called her personal attorney, he began to feel a fragile glimmer of hope. After Sophia's successful surgery, Jake thought he would never see Victoria Sterling again. But 3 days later, as he sat by Sophia's hospital bed, Victoria appeared with a teddy bear and a bag of books. She came not as a hospital benefactor or a helper, but as someone genuinely concerned about Sophia's recovery. "You like piano, don't you?" Victoria asked Sophia when she noticed the music book among the girls' belongings. Sophia's eyes brightened. "Yes, Daddy says I have talent." Victoria smiled. "I used to play piano as a child too. Perhaps, when you're feeling better, we could play together?" The initial brief visits gradually became longer. Victoria brought an iPad so Sophia could keep up with her schoolwork during her hospital stay. She read to the girl when Jake had to work. Occasionally, Jake would return to find them playing word games or laughing about some story. After Sophia was discharged, Jake was surprised when Victoria texted to check in. "How is she doing today? Is she remembering her physical therapy exercises?" From simple messages to video calls helping Sophia with homework, Victoria slowly became an essential part of their daily lives. One Tuesday evening, when Jake couldn't take Sophia to her first piano lesson after the accident because he had to work overtime, Victoria volunteered to take her. When Jake returned to the apartment, he found Victoria and Sophia in the kitchen, both wearing aprons and making cookies, flour scattered everywhere. "We decided to bake to celebrate the successful piano lesson," Victoria explained, looking embarrassed as she surveyed the messy kitchen. Jake stood in the doorway, watching this woman he knew lived in a luxury building in Back Bay, carefully teaching Sophia how to fold cookie dough. There was something tender and familiar about the moment, as if Victoria belonged in their small kitchen. Gradually, Victoria began joining them for dinner 2 or 3 times a week. Jake taught her to cook traditional Mexican dishes, and Victoria shared stories about her travels around the world. Sophia sat between them, eyes lighting up as she heard about distant places she had only seen in textbooks. "Why don't you stay after dinner and watch a movie with us?" Sophia asked one evening, her voice hopeful. Jake was about to interject, but Victoria smiled. "I'd like that very much." They sat on the old sofa, Sophia nestled between them, wrapped in a blanket, watching an animated film Victoria had never seen before. When Sophia dozed off, her head resting against Victoria's shoulder, Jake realized it had been a long time since he had felt such peace. On a Sunday, Victoria invited them to her apartment. Sophia was overwhelmed by the city views, while Jake felt uncomfortable amid the expensive furnishings. "This doesn't feel like a home," Victoria admitted when she saw Jake's expression. "That's why I prefer coming to your place." That evening, with Sophia asleep in the luxurious guest bedroom, Jake and Victoria sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Why did she leave?" Victoria asked gently, referring to Carmen. Jake was silent for a moment, then shared about his failed marriage, Carmen's addiction, and his fear that he wasn't good enough. "You're an amazing father, Jake," Victoria said, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. "Sophia is lucky to have you." When their fingers accidentally touched on the railing, neither was quick to pull away. 3 months after the accident, the relationship between Jake, Sophia, and Victoria had evolved into something resembling a family. Victoria helped Sophia with homework, Jake taught Victoria how to fix a leaky faucet, and the three cooked, watched movies, and even went on weekend picnics in Boston Common together. One evening, when Jake accidentally found a file Marcus had mistakenly included with the paperwork for his small construction company, a project Victoria had encouraged him to pursue, his world collapsed. Inside were Sophia's medical bills, all paid in full, totaling $67,000. Jake went to Victoria's apartment, the stack of papers in hand, anger and hurt spreading through his chest. "You paid all these bills without telling me?" he asked, throwing the papers onto her glass coffee table. Victoria stood there, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Jake, I can explain." $67,000? You paid $67,000 behind my back? What else? What else have you been paying for secretly? Sophia's piano tuition, her new soccer cleats, the groceries I thought I was buying for our dinners. "Jake, please sit down, let me explain," Victoria pleaded, but Jake couldn't hear anything over the blood rushing to his ears. "I'm not your charity case, Victoria. I'm not some poor immigrant you can rescue to feel better about your husband's death." Victoria recoiled as if slapped. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been treating Sophia and me like your personal feel-good project." "You're being ridiculous." Victoria set down her wine glass, her hands shaking. "I care about you, about both of you." "Do you care about us, or do you care about how we make you feel needed?" Jake paced back and forth, his work boots loud on her polished floors. "God, I'm so stupid. I actually thought you might..." "Might what, Jake? Talk to me." "I thought you loved me." The words came out broken, as if they hurt to say. "Not my situation. Not my cute kid. Not the way I make you feel like Mother Teresa. Me." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "I do love you. Both of you. No, you love the idea of us. The poor single dad and his grateful daughter. It makes you feel good about yourself, doesn't it? Like you're not just some rich widow buying her way into a family." "Stop it." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Why? Because it's true." Jake grabbed his jacket from her couch. "I should have known this was too good to be real. People like you don't fall for people like me unless there's something in it for you." "People like me?" Victoria's voice turned cold. "What exactly does that mean?" "Rich people. People who think money solves everything. People who can't tell the difference between charity and love." Victoria stood up, hands clenched into fists. "You want to know what people like me are really like, Jake? We're people who watch our husbands die and have nobody to sit with us in the hospital. We're people who have more money than we know what to do with and no family to spend it on. We're people who meet a man and his daughter in the worst moment of their lives, and for the first time in months, remember what it feels like to be needed for something other than our bank account." "Then why didn't you tell me about the bills?" "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this." Victoria threw her hands up. "I knew you'd be too proud to accept help, even help that meant nothing to me, but everything to you." "It's not about pride, Victoria. It's about trust. How am I supposed to trust you when you've been lying to me for months?" "I wasn't lying, I was protecting." "You were controlling." Jake's voice was quiet now, which was somehow worse than when he was yelling. "Just like Carmen used to do, making decisions for me, telling me what's best for me, acting like I can't take care of my own family." Victoria recoiled. "I am nothing like your ex-wife." "You're right, Carmen never had $67,000 to throw around. But the result is the same. I end up feeling like less of a man." "Jake, that's not what I meant to..." "I know what you meant to do. You meant to fix everything, just like you always do. But some things can't be fixed with money, Victoria. Some things have to be earned." Jake headed for the door, then stopped. I need some time to think about this. About us. What does that mean? It means I don't know if I can be with someone who doesn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, even when the truth is that she's helping me. After Jake left, Victoria sank onto her couch and cried harder than she had since David's funeral. She'd been trying to protect Jake's pride, trying to show him she cared, trying to be part of their family. Instead, she'd destroyed the best thing that had happened to her since losing David. Her phone rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Victoria, I have bad news," he said without preamble. "Carmen Martinez just filed for emergency custody of Sofia. She's claiming Jake is an unfit father who's been exploiting his daughter's medical situation for financial gain." Victoria's blood went cold. What? She's hired Rebecca Walsh. She's good, Victoria, really good. And she has evidence of Jake's financial struggles, including medical bills that were mysteriously paid by an outside party. The bills I paid. The bills you paid. Walsh is arguing that Jake has been essentially pimping out his relationship with you for money, using Sofia as bait to land a wealthy woman. She's calling it emotional fraud. Victoria felt sick. Her attempt to help Jake had now given his ex-wife ammunition to take Sofia away from him. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Carmen completed her rehab program last month. She has a clean record now, a steady job in Denver, and she's claiming she wants to provide Sofia with a stable home away from what she's calling Jake's opportunistic lifestyle." "This is my fault," Victoria whispered. "Victoria, you were trying to help." "I destroyed them, Marcus. I destroyed the only real family I've ever been part of, because I couldn't just let Jake handle his own problems." "What do you want me to do?" Victoria looked out her penthouse window at the city below, thinking about Jake's proud face when he discovered her secret, thinking about Sofia's laugh, thinking about the family she'd had for just a few perfect months. "Everything," she said finally. "I want you to do everything we can to keep Sofia with her father. I don't care what it costs." "Victoria, given your relationship with Jake, it might be better if you stayed out of this legal battle. Your involvement could make things worse for him." Victoria closed her eyes. Marcus was right. The best thing she could do for Jake and Sofia now was to stay away from them completely. But that didn't mean she was going to let Carmen take Sofia away from the father who loved her more than life itself. "Set up a meeting with Rebecca Walsh," Victoria said. "It's time Carmen Martinez learned that she's not the only one who can play hardball." The custody hearing began a week later. Carmen sat at the plaintiff's table, looking clean and professional in a navy suit. Jake sat with Marcus, trying not to look at the gallery where Victoria was supposed to be. She wasn't there. "Your Honor," Walsh began, "my client seeks emergency custody of her daughter, Sofia Martinez, due to the father's recent pattern of exploitative behavior and unstable living situation." Jake's hands clenched as Walsh painted him as an opportunistic gold digger who had used Sofia's medical emergency to manipulate a wealthy widow. She presented evidence of his unpaid bills, his modest apartment, his lack of higher education. Mr. Martinez has created an unhealthy environment where his daughter is exposed to inappropriate adult relationships based on financial transactions rather than genuine affection, Walsh continued. Sofia needs stability, not a father who parades her in front of wealthy strangers for personal gain. When it was Marcus's turn, he did his best to defend Jake's character and parenting. Neighbors testified about Jake's devotion to Sofia. Her teachers spoke about her academic improvement, but without Victoria's resources, their case felt thin. On the second day of the hearing, a murmur rippled through the courtroom as Victoria Sterling walked in. She wore a simple black dress, her blonde hair pulled back. For the first time since their fight, Jake looked directly at her. She looked tired, as if she hadn't been sleeping. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus began, "please tell the court about your relationship with Mr. Martinez and his daughter." Victoria's voice was steady and clear. "I met Jake in the worst moment of his life, when Sofia was fighting for her life after a car accident. I watched him do everything a devoted father would do. Refuse to leave her side, fight for her medical care, put her needs above his own comfort and pride." "And what was the nature of your financial assistance to the Martinez family?" I helped with medical bills because I could, and because Sophia deserved the best possible care. Jake never asked for money. He never asked for anything except the right to take care of his daughter. Walsh stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Sterling, isn't it true that you've been grieving your husband's recent death and seeking to fill that emotional void through involvement with Mr. Martinez's family? Victoria was quiet for a moment. I was grieving, yes, but Jake and Sophia didn't fill a void. They helped me remember what it felt like to be part of a family again. There's a difference. A family you could buy your way into? No, Victoria said firmly. A family that welcomed me because Jake Martinez is a good man who raised an incredible daughter. Money had nothing to do with the love I felt for them. Love that has apparently ended given that you and Mr. Martinez are no longer together. Victoria glanced at Jake, and he saw tears in her eyes. Our relationship ended because I made decisions for Jake without consulting him, because I let my resources become a wall between us instead of a bridge. That was my failure, not his. After Victoria stepped down, she didn't return to the gallery. Jake watched her leave and felt something break inside his chest. As the hearing continued, Carmen's mother took the stand next, but instead of supporting her daughter, she shocked everyone. Your Honor, I love Carmen, but she's not ready to be Sophia's primary parent. She's been clean for 3 months, and that's wonderful, but Sophia needs consistency. She needs her father, who has never wavered in his devotion to her. Judge Morrison retired to deliberate. Jake sat in the hallway with Sophia, both exhausted. Marcus was on his phone, pacing. Carmen sat at the other end of the hall with her lawyer. Dad, Sophia said quietly, if I have to go live with Mom, will you visit me? Jake pulled her close. You're not going anywhere, baby. We're going to be okay. Promise? Jake looked down at his daughter's trusting face and made a promise he prayed he could keep. 20 minutes later, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked serious as he shuffled through his papers. This case presents a difficult question about what constitutes the best interests of a child, he began. Jake held his breath. However, before I render my decision, Mrs. Sterling has requested to address the court with an additional matter that may impact this case. Victoria stood up from the back of the courtroom. Jake stared at her in confusion. Your Honor, Victoria said, walking to the front of the room, I would like to formally petition this court for permission to adopt Sophia Martinez as my daughter, with Jake Martinez's full consent and support. The courtroom erupted. Carmen's lawyer was on her feet objecting. Marcus looked stunned. Furthermore, Victoria continued, raising her voice above the chaos, Mr. Martinez and I intend to marry, making Sophia legally and permanently part of a stable two-parent household. Judge Morrison banged his gavel for order. Mrs. Sterling, this is highly irregular. Your Honor, I know it's unusual, but Sophia has already become my daughter in every way that matters. I love her as if she were my own child, and I love her father, not because of money or convenience, but because they are my family. Jake stood up slowly. Victoria! What are you doing? She turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. I'm fighting for our family, Jake, the way I should have from the beginning. Not with money, but with love. Judge Morrison studied them all for a long moment. Mr. Martinez, do you consent to Mrs. Sterling's adoption petition? Jake looked at Victoria, this incredible woman who had just put herself and her reputation on the line for him and Sophia. Yes, Your Honor, I do. And the marriage proposal? Yes to that too, Jake said, his voice breaking. If she'll still have me after I was such an idiot. Victoria smiled through her tears. That's a yes. Sophia jumped up from her seat. Does this mean Victoria gets to be my mom for real? Judge Morrison actually smiled. Well, young lady, that depends on several factors. But I have to say this is the most interesting custody case I've presided over in 20 years. 6 months later, Jake stood at the altar of Boston General Hospital's chapel, watching Victoria walk down the aisle in a simple white dress. Sophia skipped beside her, carrying both rings in a small velvet box and grinning as if she'd planned the whole thing herself. You look beautiful, Jake whispered when Victoria reached him. You clean up pretty good yourself, she whispered back, straightening his tie. The ceremony was simple, but perfect. Jake's construction crew sat next to Victoria's business associates. Marcus Webb dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Carmen sat in the back row with her mother, both of them crying, happy tears, Jake realized with surprise. After they exchanged rings and kissed, Sophia threw her arms around both of them. Finally, now we're officially a family. The reception was held at their new house, not Victoria's penthouse or Jake's apartment, but a home they'd chosen together in Sophia's school district. The backyard was filled with mismatched tables and chairs, string lights, and the sound of laughter in both English and Spanish. "Speech! Speech!" Miguel called out, raising his beer bottle. Jake stood up reluctantly. "I'm not good at speeches." "You're terrible at speeches," Sophia corrected, which got another laugh. "Thanks for the support, mija." Jake cleared his throat. "A year ago I thought my world was ending. Tonight, I know it was just beginning. Victoria, you didn't just save Sophia's life that night in the hospital, you saved mine too. You taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, and that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to grow together." He turned to Sophia. "And you, little one, you taught both of us that families aren't just about blood or marriage certificates. They're about choosing to love each other every single day." Victoria stood up and took the microphone. "I used to think I had everything figured out. Big house, successful business, perfect plans. But I was just going through the motions of living. Jake and Sophia taught me the difference between existing and actually being alive. They taught me that the best things in life can't be planned or bought. They have to be built one day at a time with patience and love. And really terrible dad jokes." "My jokes aren't terrible," Jake protested. "Honey, your jokes are legendarily bad," Victoria said, kissing his cheek. "But I love them anyway." As the evening wound down, Carmen approached them hesitantly. "Jake, Victoria, could I talk to you for a minute?" They stepped aside while Sophia played with her cousins. "I owe you both an apology," Carmen said quietly. "I was angry and scared, and I tried to take Sophia away from the only stable home she's ever known. That was wrong." "Carmen," Jake started. "No, let me finish. You're a good father, Jake. You always were. And Victoria, Sophia lights up when she talks about you. I can see how much you love her. I want to be part of her life, but I know now that her home is with you both." Victoria reached out and hugged Carmen. She's lucky to have a mother who loves her enough to want what's best for her, even when it's hard. 2 years later, Jake stood in their backyard teaching a group of neighborhood kids how to build birdhouses through Victoria's community program. His construction company was thriving, and he had just hired his third full-time employee. "Dad, you're doing it wrong," Sophia called from the picnic table where she was helping sort screws and nails. At 10 years old, she had become his unofficial assistant and harshest critic. "I've been building things since before you were born, mija," Jake replied, but he was smiling. "Yeah, but you never listen when I tell you the easier way to do it." Victoria emerged from the house, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the other carrying a pitcher of lemonade. At 6 months pregnant, she glowed with happiness. "How are my construction workers doing?" she asked, setting the pitcher on the table. "Your husband is being stubborn again," Sophia reported. "He's probably right," Victoria laughed, sitting down carefully. "Your little sister is going to be just as opinionated as you are." "Good. Someone needs to keep Dad in line when I'm at college." Jake walked over and kissed Victoria's forehead, then knelt down to talk to her belly. "You hear that, baby girl? Your big sister's already planning to abandon us." "I'm not abandoning you. I'm going to be a doctor, remember? I'm going to fix people who are broken, just like Mom fixed our family." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Pregnancy hormones, she claimed, but Jake knew better. Even after 2 years, Sophia's casual acceptance of Victoria as her mother still moved them both deeply. As the sun set, their backyard filled with the sounds of children playing, parents chatting, and the general chaos of a house full of love. Jake looked around at the life they'd built. Messy, loud, imperfect, and absolutely everything he'd never dared to dream of. Sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, and sometimes the greatest love stories begin with 4 simple words. You're not alone anymore. Fractured lives can become whole when the right person comes along. not because of status or money, but because of the courage to trust again. If this story has made you believe that acts of kindness and unconditional love still exist in today's world, share it to spread a message of hope.